People, let's talk about this thing which is as old as time itself. No, not that. It is corruption. Yes, that sneaky little devil that's been lurking in the shadows of society since humans first figured out how to trade a shiny rock for a slightly less shiny stick. But seriously, folks, corruption is no laughing matter. It's a cancer that eats away at the very foundations of our society, eroding trust, hampering progress, and generally making life miserable for everyone except those who are in on the game. Now, you might be thinking, John, why should I care about corruption? I'm just trying to get through my day without spilling coffee on my shirt. Well, dear viewer, corruption affects us all, whether we realize it or not. So buckle up, because we're about to take a wild ride through the murky world of corruption. Let's dive in, shall we? All right, let's talk about the first ingredient in our corruption cocktail: economic hardships. Picture this. You're a government official in a country where the economy is about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. Suddenly, a friendly businessman offers you a small token of appreciation in exchange for, oh, I don't know, overlooking some minor safety violations in his factory. Tempting, right? This, my friends, is how economic hardship breeds corruption. When people are struggling to make ends meet, the line between right and wrong starts to look awfully blurry. But it's not just individuals who fall prey to this temptation. Entire systems can become corrupt when economic times are tough. The worst part? It's a vicious cycle. As we'll see later, there are ways to break the cycle, and they don't involve giving everyone a winning lottery ticket. Now let's turn our attention to the second ingredient in our corruption stew: political power. This is the kind of power that can shape nations, influence economies, and determine the fate of millions. But as history has shown us time and time again, it can also be a breeding ground for corruption. Politics. That noble pursuit where idealistic individuals dedicate their lives to public service and absolutely never ever abuse their positions for personal gain. In an ideal world, politicians would be the epitome of integrity, working tirelessly for the common good. But reality often paints a different picture. If you couldn't tell, that was sarcasm. The truth is, the allure of power can be too tempting for some to resist. You see, political power is like that one ring from Lord of the Rings. It has a nasty habit of corrupting even the most well-intentioned individuals. The desire to wield power can overshadow the initial noble intentions, leading to a path of moral compromise. One minute you're campaigning on a platform of transparency and accountability. The next you're explaining to a judge why you needed to make that unauthorized deposit. It's a slippery slope from public servant to self-serving, but it's not just about personal enrichment. The motives behind political corruption can be complex and multifaceted. Political corruption can take many forms: rigging elections, silencing opposition, and manipulating the democratic process to maintain control, creating laws that benefit your buddies in big business. These actions undermine the very foundation of democracy and erode public trust. The real kicker? Political corruption is often self-perpetuating. It's a vicious cycle that can be incredibly difficult to break. Once corrupt individuals or parties gain power, they use that power to stay in power. They manipulate systems, bend rules, and exploit loopholes to maintain their grip. It's like a game of musical chairs, except the music never stops and the same people always seem to find a seat. The rest of us are left out in the cold, wondering how the game is rigged. And while they're sitting pretty, the rest of us are left standing around wondering why our legs hurt and our wallets are empty. The impact of political corruption is far-reaching, affecting public services, economic stability, and overall quality of life. It's a dark side of authority that demands our vigilance and accountability. Let's move on to the third and final ingredient in our corruption casserole: social norms. In some societies, corruption isn't just accepted, it's expected. Need to get a driver's license? Better slip the examiner a little something extra. Want that building permit? Hope you brought your expedite fee. The problem is, once corruption becomes normalized, it's harder to fight than a greased-up octopus. People start to see it as just the way things are done. They might even rationalize it. Well, if I don't pay the bribe, someone else will, and then I'll be at a disadvantage. Breaking these norms requires more than just new rules. It requires a fundamental shift in how people think about right and wrong, fairness and justice. And let me tell you, that's a lot harder than just passing a law saying no more corruption, pretty please. Section 5. Economic consequences. The hidden tax on progress. Now that we've mixed up our corruption cocktail, let's take a look at what happens when we drink it. And yeah, it's not pretty, and the hangover lasts a lot longer than your average tequila binge. First up, the economic consequences. Corruption is like a hidden tax on everything. Need to start a business? That'll be an extra fee for processing. Want to bid on a government contract? Hope you brought your special consideration checkbook. This hidden tax doesn't just affect individuals, it drags down entire economies. Foreign investors look at corrupt countries the way you look at that sketchy food truck with no health inspection sticker. The result? Less investment, less growth, and more poverty. Instead of going to the most qualified or the most in need, resources go to whoever has the fattest envelope of cash. And let's not forget about the brain drain. Section 6. Social injustice. Widening the gap between haves and have-nots. In this section, we delve into the deepening chasm that separates the privileged from the underprivileged, a divide that is growing wider with each passing day. Corruption doesn't just mess with the economy, it takes a sledgehammer to the very fabric of society. It undermines the principles of fairness and equality, creating an environment where only the unscrupulous thrive. It's like a twisted Robin Hood, except instead of stealing from the rich to give to the poor, it's stealing from everyone to give to the already wealthy and powerful. This perverse redistribution of resources exacerbates the existing inequalities. This leads to a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. The rich get richer, consolidating their power and influence, while the poor find themselves increasingly marginalized and disenfranchised. On one side, you've got people who can afford to grease the wheels, jump the queues, and generally live like corruption is their own personal fast pass at Disneyland. They enjoy exclusive access to opportunities and resources, further entrenching their privileged status. On the other side, you've got everyone else, stuck in the slow lane, watching their chances of a better life zoom by like a Ferrari on the Autobahn. These individuals are left to navigate a system that seems designed to keep them down. Corruption erodes trust faster than acid on a sugar cube. It creates a pervasive sense of cynicism and disillusionment, making it difficult for people to believe in the possibility of positive change. When people see that their system is corrupt, that hard work and playing by the rules don't pay off, they lose faith in institutions, in government, in each other. This loss of faith is not just a personal tragedy, it's a societal one. And here's the kicker. This erosion of trust can lead to a breakdown in social cohesion. Communities become fragmented, and the social fabric that holds us together starts to unravel. It's like a nationwide case of why bother? And let me tell you, why bother is not a great slogan for building a thriving society. When people stop believing in the system, they stop participating in it, leading to a vicious cycle of disengagement and decline. Section 7. Weakened governance. When the ship's captain is asleep at the wheel. Now let's talk about how corruption affects governance. Again, it's not good. It's about as helpful to good governance as a chocolate teapot is to making a proper cuppa. You see, corruption doesn't just affect the economy and society, it goes right to the heart of how a country is run. When corruption infects governance, it's not just about a few bad apples skimming off the top. It fundamentally changes how decisions are made. Instead of asking what's best for the country, corrupt officials are asking what's best for my offshore bank account. This leads to policies that benefit the few at the expense of the many. Section 8. Transparency, shining a light on shady dealings. All right, enough doom and gloom. We've spent enough time focusing on the problems, the shady dealings, and the corruption that seems to seep into every corner of our institutions. Let's talk solutions, starting with transparency. Transparency is the cornerstone of accountability and trust in any system. Because if corruption is a cockroach, transparency is the 100-watt bulb that sends it scurrying back into the shadows. Just like how light exposes the hidden, transparency reveals the truth. Transparency is all about making information available to the public. It's about ensuring that the actions of those in power are visible and open to scrutiny. It's like turning the government into a glass house. Sure, it might be a bit awkward for the people inside, but it sure makes it harder for them to get up to no good. When everyone can see what's happening, there's less room for deceit. Want to know how your tax dollars are being spent? There's a website for that. These platforms allow citizens to track expenditures and hold officials accountable. Curious about who's funding your local politician? There's a database for that. Knowing where the money comes from can reveal potential conflicts of interest. But transparency isn't just about dumping a bunch of data online and calling it a day. It's about more than just availability. It's about making that information accessible, understandable, and actionable. Data should be presented in a way that the average person can comprehend and use. Of course, implementing real transparency isn't easy. There are numerous challenges, from technical hurdles to resistance from those who prefer the shadows. But here's the thing. In a world where information travels at the speed of light and secrets have a shorter half-life than a mayfly, trying to keep things hidden is often a losing battle. The push for transparency is not just a trend. It's a necessity for a fair and just society. Section 9, Law Enforcement Giving Teeth to Anti-Corruption Efforts. Now, transparency is great and all, but it's not worth much if there's no one to act on that information. That's where our next solution comes in, law enforcement, because sometimes you need to do more than just shine a light on corruption. You need to grab it by the collar and throw it in jail. Effective law enforcement against corruption is like having a really good immune system for your body politics.